Welcome to The Secret Truth. I'm George Butler. With me is Andrew Kreig, and we're at the 2016 JFK conference here in Dallas, Texas. Welcome to the program, Andrew Kreig.
Well, it's a real honor to be with you, George. Thank you.
Now, you have quite a background as a public affairs commentator, author, attorney, and legal reformer. Give us a basic overview of your work in the past and up to date today.
Well, I've been an attorney in Washington, D.C. for about 25 years. And part of that was in the high-tech field. I ran a trade association of wireless communications. But before that, I was a reporter. And at the end of 2008, I started really reflecting about how the public really doesn't understand the degree of problems in Washington that affect the nation. So I founded a nonpartisan investigative reporting organization called the Justice Integrity Project to at first look at political prosecutions that targeted people on the basis of their politics unfairly. But that spread into a kind of wider research of who's appointing these judges and prosecutors, why, and the last part of this is that led to the thought that we really have to understand part of these historical tragedies like the JFK assassination, Robert Kennedy assassination, Martin Luther King, to really work our way up to the present and understand how we got here, or we can't understand the future.
You know, this secrecy, this national secrecy in these national intelligence agencies, are they totally out of control compared to what they were 50 years ago? Do we have just too much secrecy?
We do have too much.
How did that grow that fast?
Well, I think that along with a lot of other people at this conference here, a very important conference, is that a turning point was reached in 1963 when the let's call them intelligence agencies, but the people that are in them really call them covert action agencies with the euphemism as their intelligence. Intelligence sounds kind of passive, harmless research, but those truth tellers who are in that community look on them as kind of propaganda, action, regime change, election rigging agencies, even more than the passive intelligence. And once John Kennedy was taken out and a cover-up was installed, in my belief and that of many other researchers, the secret element of our democracy realized that the sky's the limit of what they could do.
The same participants of the events in the 1963 November 22nd of JFK assassination, are they still in power but on a higher level, or what? What do you see there?
I think they are. Of course, almost all of the individuals, not all, but almost all of the individuals are gone, but the institutions continue. And I think it's important to not demonize everybody who works in intelligence or any of these entities. And if I can kind of use my hands, I'm not Italian, but there's a lot of benefit in using the hands. So you have maybe the intelligence agencies here, but at a higher level, you have what I would call the puppet masters. In fact, I wrote a book called Presidential Puppetry.
Right. Presidential puppetry. Right, Obama, Romney, and their masters.
And the thought
it draws on a century of history.
Yes.
Of the really top-level manipulators and puppet masters.
Right. And the book goes back a century to show that while we focus only on the presidential candidates, in this case Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump,
right,
that we're neglecting who's above them, but just as important, the intelligence agencies, the FBI, and the media, that with the exception of certain independent outlets such as yours, the media is a big part of the puppet masters.
Yes, yes. Well, Alan Dulles, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Is, Operation Mockingbird, I think.
Oh, yes.
He started consolidating those around certain ideas and control systems, did he not?
Well, he did, and what's very important, even sophisticated audiences who know about Operation Mockingbird, anybody could look it up on Google and Wikipedia because of declassified documents, but there's a mistaken impression, unless you think about it, that this is the CIA telling the news media, the 40 top broadcasters and magazines and newspapers what to do. But the more accurate view of this control and why the institutions remain and cannot really cover something like JFK is that the owners of these media were themselves puppet masters, and they were working cooperatively with the CIA because the CIA is in effect a law firm or a research and action agency for the puppet masters. So to get very specific, get away from the abstractions, the news media guru who was kind of the coordinator of Operation Mockingbird was Philip Graham, the publisher of the Washington Post.
Yes, yes.
And
Catherine Graham, his wife,
his husband.
who carried it on later.
Yes, she carried
his
it on
death.
later, and he met weekly with the head of Operation Mockingbird, Frank Wisner, and in Catherine Graham's memoir, I think it's called Personal History, she says they had dinner every week, and she makes it seem like it's just a purely social thing. I'm sure there were, some social aspects of it, but looked at long and hard, you say, wait a second, the news media head of the Washington Post, who was organizing all the news media into Operation Mockingbird, just happens to have social dinners every week, more or less, with the head of the CIA's.
The good old boy network here we're talking about, right?
With the CIA's. And here we're talking.
Big social club.
Yeah. And
but it's about power and money, too.
Well, exactly. And one way to look at the Washington Post, I'm in Washington. I read the Washington Post every day. But when you go into this history, you realize that Philip Graham's father-in-law, Catherine Graham's father,
quite a politician, was he not?
Well, he's not only a politician, but he was a banker. So he was head of
banking money. Yeah,
he was head of the Federal Reserve Bank.
I've got you. Right.
In the 1920s, he was the number one first head of the World Bank after World War II. So looked on in that way, this Eugene Meyer is a wealthy banker, powerful banker, who happens to have a newspaper. He doesn't happen to have it, but the banking and the newspaper and the intelligence are integrated all together.
Oh, gosh. It's fascinating to study this power system, is it not?
It is, and to tell you the truth, George, I have many interests and friends, and some of them say, why don't you do something that's fun? Why don't you do something interesting? Why don't you watch movies and sports and this and that? And I love all those things, but once you start thinking about this, why do we need to read novels when the truth is where the novels come from?
I mean, I've attended one Bilderberg group meeting in Copenhagen in 2014. In Copenhagen, Denmark, and that's the first one that I didn't attend the meeting, but I was on the outside. Let me restate that. But that is one of the higher groups, is it not? The Bilderberg?
Well, it absolutely is.
They've got kings and queens there, and head of the Bank of England and MI6. I mean, that's pretty high up.
Well, what's interesting is that for many years, until recently, and pressure of those like you, it was all totally secret. And of course, the name, as you know, but and many of your listeners, but maybe not all, comes from the first meeting was in 1954 in a little place in the Netherlands called Bilderberg.
Yes.
And I've done some recent research.
It was a hotel by that name.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was the founders were the Rockefeller and Rothschild family. And I've got two new things about that if you don't mind, I'd like to share. One that almost gives a cold chill as I describe it, but even those of us who are researchers and have penetrated that, okay, it's the Rockefeller, Rothschild, and the 130 people that they thought were the most important, including the Queen of England, the Queen of the Netherlands, they're going to be invited for these secret meetings, and that they claim, well, nothing really happens there. But we know better. But here's the new angle I found out
What's
about.
that?
That the publisher of Time and Life magazine.
Yes. Lucis, yeah.
Well, actually, one step down.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking about a man named Charles Douglas Jackson.
Yes, C.D. Jackson, yes.
And maybe your audience already knows that.
A little bit.
But it turns out that he has been described in a couple biographies that I've dug into as the most important Cold Warrior of the entire United States, because he was advisor to President Eisenhower on national security. He was considered the number one expert on psychological warfare in the entire United States. And here's the Bilderberg reference, and then I'll get to the JFK reference. The Bilderberg reference that I came across says that, okay, the Rockefellers and Rothschilds organized Bilderberg, but that Jackson was the main guy implementing it to make things happen. So, and that he went to the first 13
well, he organized. He brought the American contingency to the conference of the 1954 first meeting, but also C.D. Jackson was a psychological warfare officer during World War II, but also he had worked for the Lucis before World War II. He rejoined them after his brief stint in Eisenhower's White House, but also he was the man that went after Joe McCarthy. There were two factions about how to handle Joe McCarthy, and one was to leave him alone and he'll go away. The other one was led by C.D. Jackson, and they attacked him.
Well, he had, as you point out, a varied and as in any high achievement individual, successes as well as downsides. So I don't mean to demonize him, but my last point, and these are great points you're bringing out, is that out of all the people in the world, he ends up being publisher of Time magazine, the most important magazine, and Life, under Henry Luce.
Yes,
but so here you have the number one psychological warfare man in charge of the two most important magazines, Time and Life, and the last part, a chilling thing, he acquires exclusive rights to what's sometimes called Zapruder film, or there's a couple different pronunciations, but it's commonly called Zapruder, but I think the right
Zapruder family.
But also the memoirs of Marina Oswald. And oddly, when you think about it, the marketplace of ideas, you think, well, okay, they're in the publishing business, that's how they make their money, but they never published her memoirs, and they kept the film secret, except for selected.
They did not distribute it widely, the Zapruder film. C.D. Jackson, in one reference that I read, was a CIA agent the whole time.
Of course.
And the other thing about C.D. Jackson is that the reason, in my opinion, that he helped go after and destroy Joe McCarthy was Joe McCarthy was going after the Trotskyite network in our State Department. And had he revealed that, it would lead back to the Illuminati system, which is behind the Bilderberg Group. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, and
so they stopped him cold and discredited him, and then boom, he's gone.
Well, and what we're, I think, in part talking about is the kind of one world government.
Yes. If you want to use it, the Illuminati is behind the one world government, or if as a general term, you know what I mean. But the Trotskyite network was first begun in the early 1900s. Leon Trotsky was in New York City in 1917. And he was placed upon a freighter to Petrograd. And he was networking in the New York City area before he left on that journey to go in and help Lenin and them start the Bolsheviki revolution.
Well, George, I got to smile, even though I hope we're not quite at the end, but I thought I was going to be revealing some new information about Charles, and you're educating me. I should have known because of your reputation.
The back and forth is good, I think, for the viewing audience and for the knowledge out there.
I shouldn't have been surprised, but I thought I'd made these discoveries, but you knew the background. There's one last thing, though, I'd like to say about Jackson and all of this, is that it illustrates how pervasive this is. You use the word, I think, because you're just kind of combining things in brevity. Agent, one other way to think of this is asset, because he probably was not getting money specifically from CIA. It's pervasive. They're getting scoops. They're getting their money in other ways. But here's the final last point on this is we're here in the present, and you might think, oh, why are we here in this ancient history?
Right.
Well, Time Life is the parent of Time Warner. Right. CNN, and the problem why CNN and Time Warner are not here to hear these kind of amazing stories is that's a brand name. And if Time Life is discredited in the way that we're describing, that goes to CNN slogan, the most trusted name in news. So. And all these other organizations, Washington Post and elsewhere, they're protecting that brand name by ignoring this.
Yeah. Well, that's great. There was one little final point that I might bring up on the Lucis Empire. The Lucis were described as synergists, and the synergist movement came out of Europe. And the idea is that the secret society groups are controlling the politics from behind the scenes. And that's what's been going on.
Well, it is.
It came out of France. There was a Frenchman that originated the synergy idea and theory.
Well,
he was a synthesis to a certain extent. That's where the word synergy was used, or synarchy in this case. But it evolved really, or it specified, or it focused in on the secret societies secretly controlling the major political systems.
Well, absolutely.
And economies too.
Absolutely. And could I make one final point? We've talked about from top, whether you call it the cabal, Illuminati, puppets, masters. But there's two other brief points. One is the puppet strings, because at that level, they're not visiting the White House to provide an agenda. So they have people who maybe have some inconsequential title like assistant to the president or something.
Right.
And we've got to watch as a new administration takes over, who are these advisors, who are writing the speeches, who are providing the briefings.
Exactly.
And that is a level, and having been in Washington, been involved in a transition.
Right. That's what your interest is.
Those appointments underneath.
Yes.
Because we may know the name Rockefeller. He's still alive at age 101.
They're very powerful figures.
But their influence is often recommendations on who's going to run.
That's what's doing. You make a good point, Andrew. And what they're trying to do now is they can't control Trump totally, but they're trying to run in enough appointees to control him through that system.
Yes. And even he,
a lot of Goldman Sachs people out there.
absolutely,
Out there.
and even he doesn't have time. There's 4,000 jobs he's got to appoint.
Right.
He can't figure out.
He can't vet
every
them
one of
all
them.
totally.
Exactly.
And I think Trump, to some extent, is pretty knowledgeable, but not like you. I don't think he knows the system, the power system, quite like you do, and other researchers that have looked at this for lifetimes. You know what I mean?
And they can be very canny. Maybe a final quick point. I'll mention a book of a man who worked with the Defense Department, CIA, during the Eisenhower and Kennedy administration.
Right.
His name is Colonel Fletcher Prouty. And in
Yes,
his book,
yes.
The Secret Team, he points out how a briefing officer could fool even somebody as smart and canny as Lyndon Johnson and ease them into a situation, because even a president like Johnson, they can't get underneath every briefing and paper.
Right.
So
Right.
we'll leave it at that. and-
I like your points, especially with all these appointees come in, 4,000 plus or whatever. It's hard to do that deeply and vet that widely. But if my opinion of this new administration, if he succeeds in 3 or 4 of the main goals that he expressed throughout this campaign, it'll be a success. But all the power boys, the bankers, through their money and monopoly of money creation, aren't going to go away.
Well, we just heard
easy.
We just heard about an hour ago a very powerful articulation of that through Roger Stone right here at this conference.
Yes.
And somebody challenged him and said, "Well, what happens if not?" And Roger said, "I'd be surprised because I believe in Donald Trump, but I'll be disappointed." So
Right.
there we have it, and we'll
Right.
have to hear and see on your show
well,
and
I
elsewhere.
want to thank you, Andrew Kreig, for being with us, and your insights and your advice and stuff has been very invaluable.
My
Okay.
honor and pleasure.
Okay, thank you, sir.